Well, more Obamacare dominoes falling. The latest, the administration is making it easier to qualify for government aid through Obamacare. People don't have to prove income to qualify, kind of like those liar loans in the housing market that helped blow up the economy 5 years ago. And all of this coming on top of two other big changes as well. Here to weigh in, Avik Roy, Manhattan Institute Senior Fellow. Avik, always good to have you on the set here. Why is the administration doing this? And describe in a little more detail the step they're taking here.
Yeah, so the basic problem is that enforcing the law and making sure that people are eligible is a huge undertaking. So you have to do all these things to figure out whether people have been offered affordable coverage by the definition of the law. Because in order to qualify for the subsidies, you have to not have been offered employer-sponsored insurance, or your employer has offered coverage, but it's unaffordable, according to the government. And your income has to be under a certain threshold. So those are the three things you have to get to. So recreating logistics around that is really hard. So the government's saying, well, we give up. We're using the honor system.
We're not going to do that. We're not going to go there. You know, I just have to tell folks out there, this news came out Friday, July 5th, late. It was one of those news dumps that they do when they really don't want you to pay attention to what they have to say. But here's what I see as a big problem, Avik. So you tell people we're not going to check up on you. You can apply for coverage on these exchanges, get reimbursement from the federal government. This is going to be a huge taxpayer hit because there's no checks and balances.
Yeah, there's one check and balance, which is that if you file a tax return, the IRS can then look at your tax return and then a year later say, well, you probably were misreporting your income. We'll make you give back some of those subsidies. The question is, A, will the IRS enforce that? B, that doesn't apply to people who don't file tax returns. So if you have a lower income and you weren't supposed to qualify for the exchanges, because you didn't file a tax return, the IRS has no way of knowing how much you made. Or maybe a lot of your income is cash, right? So if you shift a lot of your money to cash, which isn't reported,
there's all kinds of ways around.
There's ways
this
to game it.
And I think, you know, for me, I look at this and it reminds me of the liar's loans in housing where banks would let anybody take out a loan and not really prove income. And we had this huge bubble and then bust in the housing market. It seems to me that now you're putting the onus on taxpayers directly with this. What could be the impact?
Yeah, so we're supposed to be spending about $150 billion a year on these exchanges when the law is fully implemented. Imagine that only an additional 10% of that is fraud. Let's say it's 20%. Then we're talking $15–30 billion a year. Over 10 years, that's $150–300 billion.
It's like Medicare, Medicaid all over again.
It's real money, yeah.
Well, you've been talking about the effect on private insurers. And interestingly, we've seen some private insurers say they're backing out of those exchanges. They don't want to be on them. Aetna was one in California. We've had others. What is the effect, in your view, on insurers? How are they going to take this news?
Yeah, so when the Obama administration delayed the employer mandate, that's a huge thing. Because if that employer mandate eventually just gets delayed forever, it becomes one of these zombie provisions in the law that never gets enforced. What does that mean? That means a lot of employers, like restaurants, say, or small businesses, will have a lot of incentive. And you talked about this early on the show. Instead of having part-time workers, they can hire people full-time but say, we're not going to offer coverage, we're just going to let you get coverage on the exchange. So then a lot more people will buy insurance for themselves, which is actually in theory a good thing, because we want people to buy insurance for themselves rather than get it from their employer. It's more efficient that way.
You may, I don't. Look, here's the problem with Obamacare, in my view, is it's dismantling a system that worked for about 40 years after World War II, that companies, as part of their package and to attract workers, would offer health insurance. How much did that cost the federal government? Not a lot. There were tax benefits, but that's really about it. Now, this is all going on the taxpayer back. That's what I object to.
Well, the amount that the government is losing or the taxpayers are saving, depending on your point of view, for the employer-sponsored system, $300 billion a year. So it's kind of a quasi-entitlement.
But don't you think that Obamacare is going to be far more expensive in the end than what we've given out in tax breaks to companies to offer health care insurance?
This is the problem. So we want people, if you ask any conservative health wonk, they'll all tell you we should buy insurance for ourselves if we want to, because that way it's portable. You can take it from job to job. You can own insurance when you start your own company. There are a lot of things you can't do if you're stuck to your employer's plan.
It's one of those things that sounds theoretically really good, but when it gets down to actually executing it, it doesn't seem to be working well.
Well, this is the problem, that Obamacare does so much damage to the individual insurance market that it becomes less attractive. So what we should do is what we have today, where you can buy insurance today on your own. You don't need Obamacare to do it. The problem is Obamacare now puts this regulatory framework on top of the individual market so that these plans are so expensive. We've talked about this before on your show, and that's going to be a problem. So because these plans are now going to be so expensive, they're not going to be as attractive. So now it's a bit of a botched system.
It's a mess.
Yeah.
It's a mess, and I'm beginning to think that Obamacare will never truly be put into place because we have so many delays and so many problems.
Well, it'll never be put into place the way it was described in 2009, 2010, but it will be put into place. It will spend enormous amounts of taxpayer dollars, and I think it'll be really hard to unwind. I think a lot of people out there think, well, it's just going to collapse on itself and vaporize. Well, businesses vaporize when they fail. Government programs don't vaporize when they fail.
That's a really good point. And just quickly, thousands of dollars that individuals could get through this program if they're not checked up on. $9,500 example of a premium tax credit that some of these people would get in a family of four. It's amazing the money at stake. Avik, thanks for coming in tonight. Appreciate your time and great to have you on set.
Always a pleasure.